Hello, welcome to the Marc Attwood Show. Today I'm joined by Marc Nuss. Nuss, is that
That's
correct?
correct. Yeah, totally.
Good.
That's
Make
great.
sure I get that right. Marc, you're from Destiny Rescue,
That's correct. Yes.
and Destiny Rescue has saved 5,000 children from trafficking.
Yes, actually, our updated figures is actually 6,090. So, even through COVID, we kept on rescuing. So, where a lot of places, where a lot of people couldn't move around internationally, as you know, with all the COVID conditions and restrictions, we still kept on rescuing. Like we spoke to, maybe if I step back, just how we operate, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So what we do is we operate in 8 different countries. Got started out of Australia over 19 years ago. So in October it will be like our 20th birthday. And what we do is we go into to brothels, bars, and every dingy dark hole we can find, and look for children that have been trafficked into these places for sex trafficking. And once we find these girls, we rescue them out of there and take them to our rescue centers where they get trauma counsel, medical help, and then we set them on an individualized pathway to freedom. So what we do is we've got different forms of rescue. And when COVID hit, we actually put it to our rescue agents whether they wanted to go home, because we use mostly Western rescue agents, because this was created by the Western world, by people flying in from all over the world. So you've got people flying in from the UK, from South Africa, from Australia, and they go to these countries as sex tourists. And basically, the Western world's kind of created this demand and supply. And then there's a certain portion of these people that fly into these countries that are looking for children to have sex with. And that's where we come in. We go undercover into these bars, brothels, act like we're sex tourists, and we go looking for these girls. And so coming back to COVID, when we started off, is that our rescue agents, basically all of them said, no, we don't want to go home. We will stay here because these children don't get a chance to go home. So we'll just keep on rescuing. And so it's, like I said, we rescued over 751 last year during the COVID conditions. So,
Wow.
and just for your listeners, we've got different versions of rescue. So we've got what we call a COVID rescue, which is where we go in as sex tourists, and we'll go and rescue go to these bars and brothels in the different places, and we'll rescue the children one at a time. And then we've got what we call raid rescues, and the raid rescues is where we work with specialist police agencies in the different countries, and we'll actually gather all of the intelligence and go undercover, do the same thing, go undercover into these places. But when we see there's more than just a couple of children in these places, we'll actually organize a raid rescue where we'll partner with these different police agencies, and then actually organize a raid for a specific time. And then on that day, the police will come and actually raid the establishment. And so the place gets shut down, everybody that's been trafficked gets set free, and the managers and that end up going to get taken into custody. And that's and in certain countries, like for example the Philippines, where we operate, that's one of our main forms of rescue. There is the raid rescues. And then we've also got the preventive rescues, where we operate in Nepal. And what we do there is we work closely with border patrol, border guards, and border points all along the Nepalese border. And our agents will there, which are ladies, will actually, they're allowed to go onto buses and etc. before they cross over to India. And actually, if they think something's not right, they'll actually ask those individuals to be removed from the bus or from the vehicle, or even once crossing by foot, and then we're allowed to actually independently at these border patrols actually separate them out and actually start talking to them and investigate their circumstances. And we've stopped so many actually being trafficked right across the border. So a lot of times we stop them just before they go, because some of these cities on the other side, once they go in there, they disappear for life. And so, and there's a lot of trickery done to try and get them to cross the border. So, and unfortunately, this is where now mobile phones, 64% first contact with a lot of trafficked children is actually through mobile phone, through social media, and etc. So so sorry, I just jumped in there, but that's basically just giving you a background of how our different forms of rescue are. And then we've also got cyber rescue, but please don't, I can keep on going and on. I'm told I can speak underwater with a mouthful of marbles when it comes to Destiny Rescue. So.
Well, good. I mean, there's a lot of questions popping up in my head. Have you been involved since the beginning with Destiny?
No. So Destiny Rescue got started by a gentleman called Tony Kirwen. And the genesis of Destiny Rescue was he was in Thailand and overheard two guys, the one guy bragging to another that he got offered a child to have sex with and do whatever he wants to do with this child. And that really, when he heard this in Thailand, it just really affected him. And he started investigating it and said, something's got to be done about this, when he realized actually what a big problem it is. And then basically started Destiny Rescue. And so, if you look at, stats in 2016, the World Labour Organization guesstimated that about 1 million children were at that stage in being trafficked into the sex industry. And it's the fastest growing illegal industry in the world. And it's this very, very tight, close, but second largest illegal industry in the world. If you look at sex trafficking alone, the figures are that it's about $99 billion per annum industry. So,
well, and I think it's a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, I'm quite sure it is. This is just obviously figures we can get from like World Labour Organization and different places like that.
Well, part of the reason why I do this podcast and why I'm doing most of the things I'm doing now is because of the children that have been stolen from the human race since time immemorial. And the sex trafficking is an aspect of that. I wonder, the reason I'm asking if you were involved since the beginning, because the reason I'm asking that question is because this has become an epidemic of unbelievable proportions.
Yes.
And the size of it is far, far bigger than anybody can imagine. So I wonder, do you ever feel like that Dutch boy with the finger in the dam?
Oh, yes. To stop the water flowing through the dike. Yeah, totally. Well, it can feel like that because, and you're right with the figures. Those are all only just guesstimates because it's illegal industry and a lot of things are done in secret in the dark. So it's a lot of times it feels like you're playing darts at night with the light switched off, trying to just hit the board. Yeah. So it's, but for us, how we've tackled it is. We started counting since, and that's where that figure came from, is we've been going on for 19 years, but we started officially counting from 2011. That's how we got to our 6,090 rescues. But for us, it's all about that. It's about that one child. It's like the whole thing, how you say, how do you eat an elephant? Not that I've ever eaten an elephant, but, that old saying, one bite at a time. And so for us, I don't know if you've heard that old starfish story, but if you've got this a man comes onto the beach and he sees there's thousands of starfish that have washed out, and you've got this, he sees there's a guy there that picks up a starfish, looks at it and chucks it in the water, takes another step, takes another one, looks at it, chucks it in the water. And he's just kind of looks at this for a while, and it looked like, and he walked up to this guy and said, "This is an exercise in futility. What are you doing? You can't save all of these thousands of starfish. Look, they're like everywhere." And the guy just kind of looked at him and took another one and showed it and chucked it in the water, into the water, and said, "You're probably right, but for that one, it's 100% difference." And that's for us. It's the difference we see when we rescue, because we don't just rescue these girls, but they go through a whole restorative process. So when we rescue them, they go to our rescue centers where they get trauma counsel, medical help. Then we set them on a pathway of freedom, and they're all individualized, but that includes then education, it includes vocational training, and setting them on a pathway and restoring their ability to hope again and to dream, and to get them to a point where in the end, they can actually choose their own destiny, not the one that they were forced upon to. And we've been, like I said, been doing it for so long. If you don't mind, can I give you just example of some of the examples? We've got obviously thousands of stories, but if I can share with you just some of the stories that have come across, that our girls have come across, and I'll maybe start with one story. It's the story of Cassie, and this will give you an example of what's like a generalized story of it's so many girls that this has happened to that we've rescued. And that maybe will give your your viewers a bit of an idea of what we our form where we find these girls. So Cassie is it's not a real name. So any names I use here will be fake names because we protect our girls all the way through their identities. And so with Cassie, she was part of a family of seven siblings. They were in a rural community. And their parents were starting to battle financially. They were farmers, and it just wasn't working really well that year. And so they needed some help. So they asked Cassie, and at that stage she was 14 years old. And all she knew was just farming and school. So they said, "Listen, can you please help us? And we're barely feeding the family. Can you just go and find work?" So she went to her local town to look for work, and she spoke to a friend of hers, and the friend said, "Why don't you go to the big city and just find a job?" And so in her mind, she was thinking, okay, I'm going to find maybe a job at a restaurant or wash dishes or something like that. So she took a lift with a truck and hopped in the back of a truck. It took her to 2.5 hours later into one of the cities. And they dropped her off at what they call a bus stop. But basically all of this is just a drop-off point, and there's like an oval shape bunch of bars around this place. And so Cassie's kind of standing there thinking, what now? And next minute, a lady walks out of one of the bars. And in Thailand, we call them mama sons. They are the female managers of these places. And so she walks out of the bar and says, asked her, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm here." And she said, "Are you looking for work?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "Why don't you come and work for me? Work at my bar. All you have to do is just talk to customers and let them buy you a drink." And so naively, no idea, she says yes, and they take her to this mama son leads her into this bar. And when she gets there, the mama son says, "Can you go to this room, and we've got some clothes that we want you to wear." And so she kind of goes into this a room to go and put some clothes on, and in there she just sees this little skimpy outfit that's lying on this bed, and then warning signs started going inside of her, but unfortunately for her, it was too late. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to talk about something graphic now, but this is the reality we face,
Yeah.
And so she's there, and then next minute the door opens and 4 guys walk into that room. And basically they started, as a form of breaking her in, started gang raping her. And she fought back in the beginning, trying to fight them off. And these guys just basically beat her up until she gave in, and then gang raped her. And now here's the kicker on top of it. So while they're doing this most despicable act in her most vulnerable point, humiliating point, they're videoing it.
Yeah.
And then they took that video material and they sell it on pornographic sites and on the dark web. And unfortunately for her, this happened at least about 4 other times. It's just a form of intimidation and breaking her in. And then she is forced to sleep with customers that come in. And that's where our agents drove in there and acted like we were sex tourists. And we saw Cassie. And Cassie was, you could see, just filled with fear, a broken little vessel. And our guys just called her across and sat with her and started talking to her. And with the girls, sometimes we'll visit them 3 or 4 times, and we'll give excuses why we're not booking her out to go and abuse her in a hotel room, till we feel it's kind of that they'll be, because they just think we're just another dirty John that's flown in to come and abuse them. And so, anyway, long story short is our guys then felt it was the right time, and then quietly showed her why they were there, and offered to take her away from there. And so Cassie basically immediately said yes, and so our guys went and paid the bar fine as if they were going to take her to a hotel and to abuse her. But she hopped on the back of their bike and they rode off. And now what we'll do a lot of times is our guys will actually, ahead of time when we bring a new girl in, we'll actually send a message to the rescue center, and the girls that are in there living there that have been rescued will come out to greet that new girl. And as soon as our guys kind of drove into our compound, and she saw these other girls coming to meet her, the sheer joy and elation in her, but it was nearly really over the top, And so our guys took her, and we took her to where she would be sleeping. And this is what happens to so many of our girls. So Cassie's story is unfortunately not a one-off. It's happened to so many of the girls, the children that we rescue. But the same thing also happens when we drop them off. Same thing with Cassie. She slept for 2 days without, maybe just would wake up and go to the bathroom, but would just sleep flat out for 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think of it, here's the first time they can sleep without the fear of what's walking down that hallway or who's going to come through that door. And so after she kind of settled in, slept for 2 days and settled in, we kind of just asked her about her that sheer elation when she saw it. And she said, well, when you guys told me you're going to rescue me, I've had so many broken promises and didn't trust anybody. But I thought, so I didn't know if you guys were telling the truth. But it was so bad for me, I thought, you know what, the worst is if I get killed, then that's the worst. But I still was willing to take the chance. And so when I saw those girls come out, I knew what you guys said was the truth. And so for a lot of girls, that's the start of their journey with us. And then we help them, like I said, with trauma counsel, medical, and then we start setting them on their pathways of freedom. And part of that is we realize you can't just rescue the girls and then if the parents weren't involved, then just send them home. You've got to give them a way of actually not being in that position again. And part of that is education or vocational training. So we'll help them with vocational training, and with that we've got in-house vocational training. Like in certain of our countries, we'll have, for example, what you call a beautician school for those that want to do it. So when we say beautician, it's the word they use there, but it's basically training them up to become hairdressers, do makeup, and do pedicures and manicures. Because that's a little business they can then start up on their own and go back to the village and actually do and be able to do it, especially in the rural settings. So what we'll do is we'll give them like a startup. So I'll give an example, and we've got many, but we had once we rescued actually 2 sisters together. A lot of times that doesn't happen because they split them up. So 2 trafficked sisters together, we rescued them. They wanted to go through this whole training program, so they went through our training program. Once they graduated, they spent 2 years with us, graduated. We then gave them like all the equipment and all the tools they needed. They went back to the village because it was safe to go back to the village. The parents weren't involved in the trafficking whatsoever. And they ended up setting up a little business for themselves in the middle of their little village. And all this, and when it's a shop, it's not what we think in the Western world. It was basically little wooden walls, and when they open, the tops up, and when they close, the tops down. But they were making enough money to not only look after themselves, but to look after their whole family. And so we've got that, and then we've got other organizations that we partner with because we can't do it all. Because we're a not-for-profit organization, so we totally rely on donations. We don't get any government help, although we help governments. So what we do there is then we've also had there was a cafe, and I've got to kind of be careful to mention the cafe purely because they help our girls. But there's a cafe in Cambodia that's a French-style patisserie, and what they do is they'll take the girls that want to and train them up to become actually patisserie chefs. So even all their teenagers, or even quite young, they'll train them up in it. And they'll go through also about a 2-year program there. And once they're finished with their training, these girls are fully fledged patisserie chefs. And they'll either employ them directly there, but what we were finding is that a lot of other restaurants were actually asking for these girls because they were so well trained. Yeah. And then, if you don't mind, I'll give you one more of our stories where the girls end up in is one of our girls, we saw in our rescue center that there was no direction she wanted to go into. So we were trying to work what will work for her. And so what we did is we saw that in her quiet time, in her off time, she would be sitting there in her own time, would be doing these drawings. And we could see that that's got to be the key for her. And she was really good at her drawings. And so we enrolled her into an art college in the city, in an art school. And this was in the Japanese style of art. And so she really excelled in that. And she did really well and worked hard and really improved her craft. And once she graduated with that, we then went to look for work for her. And because we really want to journey with them and see that they're in a good place. And so what we did with her, we found out right at that moment that a company came in that was starting up a digital animation company, where they make for movies and for different type of digital animation. And they were asking for people to come and apply for internships. And we took her there. She was one of the few that got picked for internship, and then she ended up getting a full-time position after an internship as a digital animator. And so, yes, I can keep on talking. We've got so many girls that have been gone in so many different directions, and that is part of the key. Is you can't just. We learned very quickly, like I said, over 19 years, we learned a lot what doesn't work, and then what works, and how to do it and how not to do it. Like in the beginning days, even with going undercover, our guys had knives pulled out on them, gunshots fired. So it's that you kind of learn very quickly what doesn't work. So and so out of this, we've worked out that you have to make sure you give them this pathway so that they can get to a point where they can dream again, where they can actually, because when they come to us, all their hopes and dreams have been shattered. And it's to rebuild that into them and get them a pathway they can actually choose their own destiny. And that's why we call Destiny Rescue.
Well, that's amazing. Amazing work that you guys are doing. It's just, I just, every time I hear these stories, I just never understand how anybody can be like those guys. It's you have to, you never get over that. I think when you realize the scale of this issue. I mean, I come from a background where there was abuse in the where I grew up, and I've come to realize that abuse is actually everywhere, but there's levels of it, right? So the stealing of children for this purpose is just incredible. And I'm wondering, you said an interesting line. You said we help governments, but governments don't help us much. Where are from your point of view, where are the governments in all of this?
Yeah. So let me just clarify that point. And that was from a financial point of view.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be amiss to you. So it was purely from a financial point of view. We do get government help where in the beginning days we tried to organize these raids because we wanted a bit more. We want to see these places shut down and closed up. We don't want to just be a role, you rescue the girls and they just go and same guys replace it with other kids. Yeah. You want actually those places shut down. So in the beginning days, we tried to organize that, and unfortunately, in certain countries, some of the police would go and get a bribe. You'd organize we had one stage, we had one of our guys was undercover in the actual place, and we had organized with the police.
Can you hear background music?
Yes, I can slightly hear that. I don't know where that's from.
Right. My son's just having a shower. I was just wondering how loud it was.
No, that's all right.
Okay.
It's good. No, it's not bothering me whatsoever. So in the beginning days, early days, we were trying to organize a raid, and then there would be somebody it's always just one, somebody in the police force. While our guy was still undercover, and he was right in there, he saw the head of the area police drive in with his car, go and speak to this bar owner. The bar owner gives him cash, and he drives off. And we knew right there at that moment, this is the children going to disappear. And so the next day, the raid happened, and it was all squeaky clean, and it was just. So we had those frustrations in the beginning. But what's happened is over time now, a lot of these countries actually wanted to start seeing a change, and wanted to, and some of the countries didn't want to be known for the places where people would travel from all around the world to come and abuse their own citizens. So they set up specialist police forces, and those are the ones that will actually work with us. And we've seen some real breakthrough in the past couple of years, where we've got now certain of those police agencies will actually ask us, when's the next raid? And us working together has been really good. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I didn't want people, it was more from the financial reason where I said that. One of the biggest changes is, and this is not whether you love him or hate him, but when Trump came into power, one of the things he did is his foreign minister was, I can never pronounce this guy's name right, so please forgive me, but Pompeia or whatever his name is.
Mike Pompeia.
That's it. There's a thing called the Pompeia Protocol that the Trump government brought in. And so what they did is said, because America gives X amount of money to all the different countries, right? So a lot of Asian countries get, and a lot of countries around the world get certain big amounts from America every year. So what he did is said, all right, this is your full amount you're getting. But if you do nothing about trafficking, you get nothing. If you do a certain amount, you get a quarter. If you do more, you get half, and so forth and so forth. So what that did is it actually brought into a lot of these governments, it brought actually a motivation to actually start wanting to do something. And that's where we could see a shift, where suddenly there were specialist police forces being created and things being created to start combating this. And so that's where we work in Dovetail, work together with a lot of federal agencies. And it, last year, for example, one of the areas we've had to go into, and COVID's really exacerbated it, was is cyber rescue. So in our first case was last year, and this will give you maybe example of working together. Actually, in England, a suspected pedophile's house was raided, and on his phone they found this video of this 2-year-old boy being molested, and that this suspected pedophile bought on the dark web, and this 2-year-old boy is being molested by his stepdad. And so they couldn't, because it got bought on the dark web, they couldn't work out exactly where, but they could work out, at least by watching it over and over, realize it was from the Philippines. So they ended up contacting the National Bureau of Investigation in the Philippines, who's worked with us on a lot of cases, and the National Bureau of Investigation contacted us. So the three groups, Destiny Rescue, National Bureau of Investigation, and the English police, worked together on this case. And we ended up infiltrating, found the dark website, infiltrating it, acted like we were a pedophile from out of Australia, and kind of bought the material first, and then started developing a relationship with the stepdad, because he was also pimping out that his 2-year-old stepson to pedophiles flying in from all over the world. And so we started infiltrating and started the dialogue, and then we set up a sting operation in the Philippines. And our operative basically supposedly flew in from Sydney, but he was already there. And we set up a sting operation in a hotel, which we cleared the hotel lobby, and it was actually the English police had representation there. The National Bureau of Investigation had guys in there, and Destiny Rescue had guys in there. And we're milling around all undercover, and then this guy walks in with his 2-year-old boy, brings him in, and basically has a chat with our guy, our undercover guy, and for money hands over this 2-year-old boy for our guy to go up and molest. And as soon as he handed over with cash, a human barrier was created between them. He got taken to jail, and the wife also, because she was just as well. She was part of the whole operation. And happy to say the 2-year-old boy is got taken into our care and has been it's total change in his life and moving on. So that and under our care. So that's cyber rescue, and with cyber rescue, that's the area that we were nearly forcibly we planned to go into it, but we had to go into it, especially with COVID. That's the big thing that's been growing more and more and more, because because people can't fly in anymore, so they've adapted their business model, and they started creating these videos and selling it in the dark web.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you mentioned that about Donald Trump, because most of the people, you don't read about any of this in mainstream media about the work that Donald Trump did to stop human trafficking. But if you actually go and look at him and his executive orders and the wall in Mexico, it's all about human trafficking. In fact, I don't know if you've seen the Evergreen tanker stuck in the Suez Canal today, which is holding up lots of ships.
No.
Evergreen is the shipping company that allegedly does a lot of the child trafficking in the containers going between going Wuhan. Wuhan is like the center for this, because you said something interesting earlier about it being the second biggest growing illegal industry. I assume you were going to say drugs above that.
Yes, that's right. So it's the second largest illegal industry in the world, but the fastest growing one.
Yeah.
So it's the fastest growing illegal industry in the world.
100%. And if anybody watching this goes and looks back at any of Donald Trump's speeches about child trafficking, he does say that the growth of this has been largely down to the internet. So the last 20, that's why I said at the beginning of the last 20 years, because the internet is about just over 20 years old. The speed of this has just been beyond belief, hasn't it?
Yeah, massively. And like I said, for us, that's why we've gone also into the cyber rescue side, because so many of it's now that they can sell, the guys will actually, unfortunately now, you're getting the case where you've got purpose, it's nearly like directed pedophile movies. So pedophiles will go onto dark web and actually say what they want to see. And you've got guys that now are like content providers molesting a child to exactly the way that person has ordered it, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
So this is it's definitely the internet and the growth of this industry are totally interlinked and created. And then therefore people can find out also through the dark web and through even websites, they can find out where the best places is to go. You'll actually have even websites that will say which cities are the best place to go to for sex tourism and all of these things. So these guys, and it's all propagated through the internet. So people that have never gone to a country will know exactly where to go to and even know how to ask for things to be able to get what they want.
And one of the good things about that is that they're leaving a digital footprint.
That's right. That's exactly it.
And I think that's one of the things that's backfired on these guys, because I remember, I mean, my knowledge of this kind of trade goes way back, and there was a Home Secretary in the UK there was a famous tape, so it was a VHS back in the 80s that he'd bought.
Oh yeah.
And everybody, it was like an open secret that this tape had been bought and sold, and all this stuff was going on. And I first learned about this about 25 years ago, and people really don't have any idea of how deep this goes. So I've got a few questions I want to throw at you.
Yeah.
It's okay if you because the way you are very specifically looking at sex trafficking in specific areas. And I'm just wondering if through that work you've ever come across SRA, whether you've come across deep underground tunnels and bases, and whether you've come across adrenochrome in any of that work.
Yes, we've heard stories about them, but not in our actual work have we come across them. I think we're so, if I can put it this way, what we've got is so in the hard face, cold face of it right in front of us. So you don't actually, because it's right. We've built up so much infrastructure, so we're right there in the depths of it. So we've heard stories and we've heard rumors, but we've not come across any of that purely because it's so in your face, in the open, nearly, if you want to put it the way, in a lot of these places. So it's very specific. If you look at about 73-74% of all children trafficked are in the Asia-Pacific Rim, and that's where we mainly focus. We've got a couple of countries outside of it, like the Dominican Republic, and that we work in, and we're going into Central America. We've got a few places we're looking at there as well, but that's where we started, because it was just such an easy gateway. It was so easy for people to hop on a plane, get there, and it's literally like, I've gone in I've had the privilege to go with some of our permanent undercover guys. I've had the privilege to go undercover into some of these places. And I tell you, I've been in bars with the double-story, wall-to-wall, men in there, and guys will be doing things to girls right in front of you. They wouldn't even bother going to a hotel room. So for us, it's so in our face what we're dealing with there. We've just not even, we're just fighting flat out just to deal with what's in front of us. We just
that's like Saturnalia. That's like the Roman festival where everything went, and it's it's pure evil. It's just pure evil beyond belief. And I suppose I was wondering whether a lot of these countries probably were reluctant to stop it because they were getting so much tourist income. But then they became known, like you said earlier, they became known as the place where men go for little girls and boys.
That's right.
And then ultimately that destroys them and destroys their reputation. So it's amazing to see that there are these incentives in place to stop it, and you've seen that that's had an effect.
Yes.
It's also amazing to see that you're doing the dark web stuff, because I wondered, in your opinion, do you think cryptocurrencies had much to do with the advancement of that?
Of course it has.
Yeah.
Of course it has, because you get different versions of the cryptocurrencies, but there's ones that are totally that are specifically made to be privacy coins. So the whole idea is that you can do things with them that can't be backtracked to you. Now you get ones that are a bit more open, that there's ways for them to kind of work out where it's come from, but a lot of them are made with a specific purpose that it can't be tracked, or very difficult to track them to come through. And so, definitely, there's no doubt in my mind about that. So, and it's yeah, the answer is yes.
Yeah, I know. Just anybody watching this is not saying that crypto in and of itself is evil.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's
You
the
know,
use of
people have,
users.
people have been using cash for the same thing
Yeah, totally.
forever as well. It's just it's like this thing that just gets like, it doesn't matter how many times you cut the head off, it just keeps growing back and back and back, and nobody's ever got to the roots of the problem. What do you think the root of the problem is? Because you've obviously, and I've met a lot of victims of abuse, including people in my own, family, and it's always fascinated me what the root of the problem is, because it is a sickness. It's not. I mean, there are certain parties that have been pushing for it to be recognised as a
choice
preference.
For
example, in the United Kingdom, there's an organisation when I was a child called the Paedophile Information Exchange, and on the Paedophile Information Exchange were a number of prominent MPs, including Harriet Harman, who's a Labour MP in the UK, who were pushing for the age to come down to 10, to 6, to keep it coming down. And there were lots of people involved in that. Lord McAlpine, who famously, and the Home Secretary was Leon Britton, who was part of Margaret Thatcher's government, which she was basically surrounded by paedophiles within the UK government. And in fact, the entire UK government and governments across the world. In fact, in Australia, it only happened yesterday that they found a bunch of paedophile activity within the Australian government, which has just come out this week. So I'm just wondering whether. I think the root of the problem, I think I know what the root of the problem is. I'm just interested if you guys, through the work that you've done, have done any work to try and stop the problem existing in the first place.
Yes. Well, for me, is what we see happen, and okay, this is once again just my opinion, right? So, but where I see part of the problem is the propagation of pornography and even extreme pornography. And what happens is a lot of these guys will start feeding on that, and it's nearly like the way I can explain it. If you've got a thing in, it's like the old story about the one dog and the other dog. But if you've got a rabid dog inside of you, and you keep on feeding that, it grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And it starts with people starting to watch pornography, and then start going down the track of watching real, stuff they shouldn't, and start going into kiddie porn and all stuff like that. And then it can't be satisfied, and it just grows, and then they've got to start acting on it. So then they look for what's the easiest source to, and so that's where you got people started. That's why you get people traveling from all over the world. So they'll leave their family behind, but they'll go and travel and go fiddle with kids on the other side of the world. And for what really angers me a little bit is when I hear people, and I've heard it. I've heard some arguments, some coming up and say, well, it's a choice. Well, all I'm saying is you just talk to those kids that we rescue, right? And then it isn't. What about them? What's their choices? What is their who's speaking up for them? Like one of my own experiences with one of the girls that stands out for me is this girl Sugi, that when I went with our permanent team undercover in Paria. So I'm sitting next to this girl, and you've got guys, even while you're sitting with her, you've got other guys just glaring at her, and you can see they want to be, and so I'm sitting right next to her, and I'm just talking to her, and there's just this mayhem happening everywhere around us, and a seedy as hell place, and I'm talking to this girl, and I asked her, I just felt to push a bit, and I asked her, I said, Sugi, how did you get here? And she's kind of very quietly starts telling me her story. And at that stage, she was comfortable with me because I've been speaking for a while with her, and she realized, that there was something a little bit different about me. And so I'm talking to her. And she told me, like 4 months before I'm sitting there with her, 4 months before, she was sitting in she was at home. Both parents were working. She was in school. And she had her younger sister, 10-year-old sister, was in school. So she was just a couple of years older than her 10-year-old sister. Both of them in school. Life was good. Her dad suddenly, unfortunately, dies. Very quickly, she realized, because her mom's now struggling with both of them in school, So out of the kindness of her own heart, so not from her mum, out of her kindness of her own heart, she says, okay, Mum, how about I go and find just a job to help and then my younger sister stays in school, and once you're on your feet, I'll go back to school. So it's quite mature for a little girl like this saying this. So she goes to look for work, and then these guys get hold of her, they railroad her into this, and they force her to sell her little body to dirty johns flying in from all over the world. Now, her plus all these other girls, the same thing is, they never dream or sit there thinking, you know what, one day I want to sell my little body to some guy flying in from over from every part of the world, and sell my little body over and over and over every day to these guys, to adult grown men flying into the country, and that's never even it never even crossed their minds until they were forced into this rubbish. So for me, when people start saying, oh, we've got rights, no. What about the rights of that child, that innocence that gets stolen, that innocence that gets destroyed? It just, I've heard that argument pop up here in Australia, and it just drives me nuts when I hear that.
It drives me nuts. It's insane that anybody can
Sorry, but it's
No, don't apologize. I'm 100% with you, and I think everybody watching this is. What your experience of rehabilitating the children, and that is going to be invaluable, in my opinion, because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I've seen enough evidence that proves to me that there are literally millions of kids underground that are being rescued during this whole virus, and the rehabilitation. A lot of them have not survived because they've been kept underground for so long. But the rehabilitation side of it is the thing that's really interested me, because that's going to be that's the most important part of it. Once you've got them, is because otherwise it's, you know, so that you know, the work that you're doing there is just beyond, it's incredible. And you've got, I've seen some of the things on the website as well. People should check the website destinyrescue.org. I put it on the screen here, because that part of the work, I think, is something that maybe isn't always done, or hasn't always been done by the rescuers, because then what happens afterwards? That's the big question, isn't it?
And that's probably what makes us also different, is not only that we go in these dark places and undercover and find them, and physically look for them, because there's some great organizations out there, but some of them it's more help. You know, people phone up if they're in trouble and stuff like that. But I use this analogy, like you know, where you are. I don't know if you have that, but in Australia we've got, like, I'm just using this as example. In Australia we've got a thing called organization called the Surf Life Saving Australia. And so you get the national arm, which does all the advertising. So if you come for a holiday here in Australia, which you should, it's a fantastic country to come to. And one of the first things you'll see when you enter into the airport, they'll say, beware for the ribs, swim between the flags. It's all important stuff that people need to know. But on the day, if you're in the water there and you start drowning, you want a lifesaver on that beach with you to come and rescue you.
Yeah.
And that's what makes, so number one, that's one of the big differences with us. We'll actually go into these dingy, dark places. We'll go and look for them. We won't wait for them to come to us. We'll go and look for them.
Yeah.
And then another very important component is then that aftercare, is that getting them to a point where they have the freedom to choose their own destiny. And part of that is then education, vocational training. If I might just give you one of the examples, one of these cases of us is the guy who's the head of our rescues. He's used different names because he's still out there rescuing. Him and Tony they still keep on going out and rescuing. They can't, you know, they just driven individuals, and so he had to fly from out of Bangkok airport to one of our, which we call undisclosed nations. If you go on our website, you'll see there's certain ones that we say undisclosed because of political sensitive reasons. They don't like that we bring attention to the fact that they've got problems in the child sex trafficking industry. So, sure. So he had to fly from Bangkok out into the neighboring one of the countries, and just how the flight was early in the morning, so he had to be there, and he arrived late in the night, stayed in a cheap motel in the international airport district. Anybody that's been in Bangkok will know kind of the area it is. And he was in the motel and was thirsty, and remembered he felt like water, and he remembered there was a 7-Eleven down the road. So he's, you know, but he didn't want to go because the one country we operate in is really, there's some rough stuff happens in this country. And he was just having an off day. And he was like, he kind of was like, I know we're making a difference in these kids' lives, but are we, he's having this moment of crisis, because he was the one who implemented early on that once we drop the undercover guys drop the girls off at our rescue centers, that's the last time they see them. It's for the protection of the girls and for our undercover guys.
Yeah.
So you kind of lost contact. What happens with all these literally hundreds and thousands of girls we rescue, and so he was just having a real crisis moment and going, man, I know we make a difference, but do we really? And the weight of it was starting to come on him. And he kind of walking towards the 7-Eleven. This is 1 o'clock in the morning in a basically semi or industrial area. And as he's walking to the 7-Eleven, he saw in the silhouette of the light of the 7-Eleven, he saw two figures, and he kind of saw they were kind of looking towards him, but he couldn't see who they were. And as he walked closer towards it, next minute they yelled out his name. And they started running towards him. And the next minute, they just jumped on top of him, gave him the biggest hug, and he kind of recognized them and realized these were two girls that he had rescued 5 years before in northern Thailand, that he was personally involved with the rescue of these girls. Wow. But then suddenly his heart sunk and go, what are they doing in this dodgy area, at 1 o'clock in the morning? And so he asked them, what are you girls doing here? And they said, didn't you know what happened to us? And he said, no. And he said, they pointed to a hospital that was just down the road, and they said, no, we're nurses, and we just came off from our shift working at the hospital down the road. And they end up telling him, saying, no, after you dropped off there and Destiny Rescue helped us, Destiny Rescue paid for us to actually do our nursing courses and helped us through that, and now we're working here as nurses here. So for him, that was right at that moment. He needed to, it was like a confirmation for him that what he's doing, divine intervention, totally, that what he's doing is the right thing. And he was fired up when he went on that plane.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And that's one example of so many. We've got girls that are now, we've got a police officer, amazing, like in Nepal. We actually rescued this girl, helped her with put her through a police course. She ended up being a police officer. Now she patrols the exact same place where she was being trafficked out of. So, and then we've got...
That's what needs to happen. You need the right people like that in there, because they know what's going on, and then uncorruptible.
Totally. And you know what? One of my dreams, and I know there's a few of us in this, one of our dreams is that one day, one of our girls will become the head of like a prime minister or a head figure in their nation.
That's what we need.
Yeah, totally. Girls that have been on the other side. And we rescue also boys. So when I say, we also rescue boys, but mostly as girls, because that's what the market dictates. Yeah.
So
but that's our dream.
Well, it's a great dream. And I'm sure it's going to happen once we've removed all the corruption from the world. Which I think is happening. But have you guys ever made a movie about this rescue work?
We've made, we actually, funny enough, we just actually made a short 37-minute movie of one of the, it was the Philippines' biggest raid against trafficking that they did in the Philippines. And we made a movie of it because Destiny Rescue put it together and then worked with the Filipino with the National Bureau of Investigation. But the project was that big, and there was a certain element of danger about this one. We don't carry weapons when we go undercover, but this one, our guys had to actually familiarize themselves with Glocks, and the actual army was involved in the raid. So we actually had to bring the National Bureau of Investigation actually said, no, this is too late, we've got to bring the army in. So they brought actually specialist forces, because there was a compound in the middle of a field. And so we've made a movie. It's a 37-minute documentary style that we made about it. So, and we've created some other videos that we're actually going to roll out soon as well.
Where's that short movie? Where is it? Is it on Destiny?
No, it's not there yet, but I should be able to actually send you a link. So so I'll send you a link on it, and and like I said, was in the Philippines, it was the biggest raid that was done in regards to sex trafficking, and Destiny Rescue was involved with it. So I'll gladly send it to you, and there's a couple of other video links I'll send to you that we've made as well. because we find that's a way of educating people and actually, because nobody knows about us yet.
But that's what I'm saying, right? Because anybody watching it, I mean, the reason I'm asking this question is because, you know, some of the biggest paedophile rings in the world have controlled the media. And so that's why you've had nothing in the media about this. And people really have zero idea of the size of this problem. And that's why I wanted to speak to Marc and Destiny Rescue, because they're out there actually doing something and have been doing something for 20 years. And they're actually making a difference. And there's a lot more to be done, but something's being done. But what's really, really important is that this information goes out there in ways that highlights the issue. And, you know, videos like this is one way. What I found over the years is the majority of people, when it comes to issues like this, most people put their fingers in their ears and they don't want to know. If it's not on their doorstep, they don't want to know. And if you give them the figures, they don't believe it. And then they just carry on with their life. And that's why I think movies and podcasts and anything we can do to just get discussing the issue is really, really important. And recently I've been in a communication with a director in Hollywood. I'm just going to show you. Let's share the screen. Wait, who made this film called A Child's Voice? Can you see that?
Yes, I can see that.
This is really, really interesting. And this is John. I'm going to get his bloody name now. So he's a producer that produced. He was one of the producers of the later episodes of the Hunger Games, and his studio is called No Restrictions Entertainment. And he's doing. I'm trying to get an interview with him, but
oh wow, okay.
And what's really interesting about that film is that and I watched it the other week with my daughter, and it was really powerful to sit with my 14-year-old daughter to watch it, because then she could see because sometimes I've had people say to me, why do you care about the children? Why do you care about pedophiles? I'm like, why don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
And although it's a really horrible subject, the kids have to know about it because it's a real thing. I mean, when I was a kid, my mum used to say there was a guy down the street who used to try to get us to go and look at his bees. And she'd say, you know, if Bert asks you about his bees, just tell him to bugger off.
Yes.
Everybody knew that he was a predatory, but nobody did anything about it. You know, the local lay preacher was a paedophile, and he ran a whole church. You know, it was around everywhere. They even teachers, so as kids, we knew certain teachers were, but nothing was ever done about them. But there's a really, really interesting film coming out very, very soon, which I don't know if you've seen, which is called The Sound of Freedom, there's a trailer for it here, which is about a guy who rescues children, a real story.
I heard about this, yes.
Yeah, and it's the only reason I'm bringing these films up is because I just want other people to go and have a look at them when they come out. Because this is the way that we have to do this. We have to get as much, because your guys are out there working, and they're affecting people on an individual basis. But billions of people need to know what they're doing. Although you can't compromise them at the same time, because they've got all to be able to know what they're doing. So you're in this catch-22 situation all the time, aren't you? Yeah,
it is. It's like somebody once said, "Oh, why don't you like World Vision show? You know, people can sponsor." We can't do that. We'll never show the faces of our girls because we don't want them to be re-abused again.
Yeah,
we want them to be able to move on with their lives and start going after their destiny, and not have to go live that over and over and over and over again. So and then with our guys, but see what we've started doing with these movies, our guys in the movies that are still undercover will have their faces blurred out. So we've started finding ways, and I agree with you. That's why we started making these documentary style, some shorter and some longer ones, like of that. When the story I told you about the 2-year-old boy that was being molested, and that whole story. With our first cyber rescue, we've made a video of that as well, to give the people the understanding so they can see behind the scenes and even see what our guys got to go through to actually have to watch that material to be able to find, so we're starting to do more and more of that because we want to spread the news about, you're right, some people just don't want to hear, like I've spoken before, and you can just see one lady just said, she literally went like this, and I don't want to hear it.
I've had that. I've had people do that.
Yeah. And I'm going, no, you need to.
Because, kind of understandable on one hand, but
but we need to, because this nearly I understand why. Don't get me wrong. I understand why they're doing it, but there's also this willful ignorance to try and say, okay, if I don't hear it, I don't have to deal with it.
Yes, exactly.
But for me, it's not. No, you can't look at this anymore and say you didn't know.
Yeah.
Because the more people get to know, then what they're left with is, do I take action or not? And action can be taken different things. Like, for example, your podcast, brilliant. There's different forms of action that can be taken out to start shining the light on this. And the more people start seeing this, for example, I got asked by a professor to come speak at a university here in Australia. So I spoke at the university, and afterwards I saw this, spoke about trafficking, spoke about what we're facing and what we're dealing with. And then I saw this one girl just kind of hovering around the back there. And then she came to me afterwards, and I could see she wanted. And she said, after hearing what you had to say and talked about sex tourism, I talked about, how many they worked out, kind of traveled overseas for sex tourism. She said, after hearing what you're saying, I feel like my eyes are open, and I'm gonna actually challenge my uncle. She said he goes 5 times a year to Thailand. We never see any pictures, not one single holiday pic.
Mm-hmm.
What is he doing there?
Yeah.
I wanted to nearly say, well, I'm quite sure I know what he's doing there. Probably walked right past him, but here it was because she heard it, and then she was like, all right, I'm going to challenge him on it. And for me, the more we start talking about these things, people will start asking the right questions and start actually challenging people and saying, well, wait a minute, this is not good.
The producer of that film, The Child's Voice, is John Paul Rice, has come back to me. He's worth looking up, and I'm saying that to the viewers as well. It's it's a bit like there was Sidney Powell gave a talk at a university about 18 months ago, and she was talking about the police that saw some of the files on a laptop belonging to Anthony Weiner, which contained something so horrific. It's called Frazzle Drip. I'm only telling that for the viewers. Look it up if you want to. It's so horrific that people just don't want to believe it. And the reason why I want to talk about this stuff online is because that time's over. You can't, like Marc just said, you cannot ignore this, right? And for me, like you said, it's any action. If it's like picking up litter, if everybody did a little bit, there'd be no litter, right?
Yep.
So like yesterday on my Telegram channel, I shared these the CIA or the FBI released pedophile images, logos and stuff, because these logos are actually everywhere. You find them once you understand the code that they talk in, like PIZZA gates, all of that kind of code that they talk in is actually on food labels. There are certain, there are companies, global companies that have got pedophile logos, images on their products, right? So, and then for me, the big one is the BBC. Now, I grew up in the UK in the 70s, and the biggest predatory paedophile in history was on TV twice a week, presenting the Top of the Pops music show, and then a kids show called Jim Will Fix It, where he had little kids on his knee on national telly. Yeah. And this is the biggest paedophile in history, in UK history, right? And they employed him. They knew exactly what he was doing. The BBC has a statue on its headquarters put up in the 1930s of a paedophile act, and the statue was made by a known and convicted paedophile, and they refused to take it down. So yesterday on my Telegram channel, I'm explaining this to people, and I'm saying, wake up. You've got to stop paying your TV license. This is the only language these people understand. You take away their money. Netflix last year put up a series about
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Girls, right?
Yep.
It's a paedophile film.
Oh, right? Totally.
And they would refuse to drop it, even though loads of people cancelled their subscriptions. But if you're watching this, cancel all your subscriptions to Disney Plus. Disney, massive paedophile organization. The BBC, Netflix, there's 3. If you've got subscriptions to them, cancel them. You've just done something to help children. And that's it's not everybody can go out and be a rescuer. But how can people, apart from just get, obviously you want to get you're funded completely by donations, but are there other people volunteer? Are there other things people can do? They just go to the website. Is there anywhere particularly you want them to engage with Destiny Rescue?
Yeah. So obviously,
spreading the word.
So definitely spread the word. Like even take this podcast, spread it with friends, send it through your social media, because that's how it gets propagated. Just don't just watch it, share it, and tell people watch this and share it. and then talk about it. Start talking about it. Go on our website, of course. If people feel they want to do something financially, please donate to our, because donations is our lifeline, if I can put it that way. We can't do it without donations.
Yeah.
But we've got real loyal donors. We've got people that have been with us for years and years, and just because they've seen us and what we do.
Yeah.
And then also start asking the right questions. It's don't be willfully ignorant. Start actually talking about these topics. Start raising it, and even start talking to your local political members and start asking what are you guys doing? Is there anything we're putting in place to actually help eradicate this disease? And so even we're from, like I would say, if people also want to start actually take, I'm happy for them to take some of our videos that you can already find on our website, and any ones that I'll send you the links, or any things like that, start sharing it. Share it with as many people as possible. So yes, we've got donations, but also start talking about it, and also share the content and videos, and share this podcast over and over and over, because that's the only way we're going to get it out there. The more people talk about it, the more people actually raise this issue, the more it's like you're shining a light on something, and the light becomes, the more you shine the light on something, the more stuff comes out. So.
And the darkness cannot exist in the light. So it's down to you to share the shit out of this, look into it. It's down to us. The governments have not been doing a great deal about it. In fact, they've been part of the problem. But we together, it's we the people time.
Yes, definitely.
So look, send me those links, please, Mark. I'll put the links below
do that.
in the description below this video so everybody can get those. And I just want to thank you for spending the time. I know it's late there in Australia.
Oh, listen, I'll talk anytime about what we do and about child trafficking. If that helps, even if that helps one child, I'll talk about it.
Yeah, well, thank God.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I really do.
It's a pleasure, and please, any guys from Destiny Rescue watching this, thank you for the work that you're doing, and any kids that have been rescued by them, hello and good luck.
Yes.
Everybody watching this, share it. Thank you, Mark. You take care of yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it once again. Thank you so much, Mark.
Cheers. Take care.
Cheers.